So, I need to know, was I wrong for what I did? Honestly, tell me if you would have done the same thing, because sometimes I replay it all in my head, and I wonder if I took it too far. But then I remember the look on his face, the absolute terror, and a part of me, a very dark, satisfied part, just doesn't care. Would you have gone to such lengths to expose a cheater, especially when that cheater was not just your boyfriend, but someone you thought you were going to marry? And when the confession, the disgusting, vile confession, was made not to you, but to your unsuspecting sister, I swear, sometimes I still feel the tremor in my hands when I think about how close he came to getting away with it, and how I had to become a master manipulator just to unearth the truth. Let's rewind, shall we? It all started, or rather I thought it started, a little over 3 years ago, when Mark entered my life. He was charming, funny, attentive, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and from the moment he smiled at me, I was utterly smitten. He had this easy laugh, a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room, and a kindness that seemed to permeate his very being. Our relationship progressed quickly, as relationships often do when you're caught in that intoxicating whirlwind of new love. Within a few months, we were inseparable. We moved in together after a year, and the conversations about our future, about marriage, about children, became more and more frequent. I truly believed he was the one. My family adored him, especially my older sister, Sarah. Sarah and I have always been incredibly close. She's 5 years my senior, and growing up, she was my protector, my confidante, my best friends. We shared everything, from secrets about crushes to the deepest anxieties about our futures. When I started dating Mark, Sarah was thrilled for me. She'd often tell me how happy she was to see me so in love, how Mark seemed like such a good man. This made the eventual betrayal all the more gut-wrenching, because it wasn't just my heart that was breaking, but the very foundation of my trust in the people I loved. The first whisper of doubt, a tiny, insidious worm, slithered into my mind about 6 months ago. It wasn't anything concrete, just a feeling, a subtle shift in Mark's behavior. He started spending more time on his phones, always keeping it face down when I was around. He'd occasionally leave the room to answer calls, mumbling something about work. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I was being paranoid, that he deserved his privacy. But the feeling persisted, a cold knot in my stomach. Then came the late nights at the office. Initially, I believed him. He was in a demanding job, and overtime was common. But the frequency increased, and his explanations grew vague. He'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, or his clothes would seem a little too well ironed for someone who'd supposedly been hunched over a desk all night. I started checking his phone bill, subtly, when he was in the shower. Nothing overtly incriminating, just a few unfamiliar numbers that he'd explain away as work contacts. My paranoia escalated. I hated myself for it, for becoming that suspicious girlfriend, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, terribly wrong. Distance. I confided in Sarah, vaguely at first. I told her I was worried about Mark, that he seemed distant. She, ever the optimist, tried to reassure me. Maybe he's stressed with work. Sis, she'd say, you know how intense his job can be. Just talk to him. I tried talking to him. He'd get defensive, accuse me of not trusting him, of being insecure. He'd turn the argument back on me, making me feel guilty for even raising the issue. This manipulative tactic only fueled my suspicions. A few weeks later, the concrete evidence, or what I thought was concrete evidence at the time, emerged. I was using his laptop to look up a recipe. He'd left it open on his desk, and a notification popped up from a messaging app I didn't recognize. It was a message from someone named Angel. The message read, "Can't wait for our trip next month, babe." Miss you already? My heart seized in my chest. Angel, babe. Trip next month. It couldn't be a work colleague. It just couldn't. I clicked on the app, my fingers trembling, but before it could load, Mark walked into the room. He saw me. Saw the laptop screen, and his face drained of all color. He snatched the laptop, slamming it shut. "What are you doing on my computer?" He barked. His voice laced with an aggression I'd never heard from him before. I confronted him, tears streaming down my face. "Who is Angel Mark? What trip?" he stammered, his eyes darting around the room. He eventually spun a convoluted tale about a work trip to meet a client named Angela, and that the babe was a joke from a male colleague who knew he was planning a surprise getaway for us next month. It was flimsy, transparent, but in my desperation to believe him, I almost did. Almost. But that knot in my stomach tightened, and a cold certainty began to settle in my bones. He was lying. He was cheating. I just couldn't prove it. The thought of losing him, of our future crumbling, was agonizing. I was terrified. But the thought of staying with a liar, a cheater, was even more terrifying. I needed proof. Irrefutable proof. I couldn't confront him again without it, because he'd just deny, deflect, and manipulate. That's when the idea, a truly terrible, brilliant, and utterly insane idea, began to form in my mind. It was born out of desperation, out of a need for the truth, and a burning desire for him to admit it, not just to me, but to someone else, someone he wouldn't expect. And that someone, in a twisted stroke of fate, ended up being my sister, Sarah. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I knew he was cheating, but he wouldn't confess to me. I needed to expose him, but I couldn't just accuse him without definitive proof. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have just walked away? Would you have hired a private investigator? Or would you have, like me, considered a more unconventional approach? I genuinely want to know, because at this point, my mind was racing, and the lines between right and wrong were getting incredibly blurry. I felt cornered, betrayed, and a deep, seated anger was starting to simmer beneath the surface. I needed to see him squirm, to see him face the consequences of his actions. The plan, as it slowly solidified in my mind, was audacious, risky, and morally questionable. But I was beyond caring about morality. I was operating on pure, unadulterated hurt and a hunger for justice. I decided I would create a fake social media profile, a secret admirer account, and use it to lure Mark into a confession. But not just any confession. A confession to Sarah. It sounds utterly insane, I know. But hear me out. Sarah was, as I mentioned, incredibly close to Mark. They spent a lot of time together, often without me, which at the time I saw as a positive thing, a sign that my sister genuinely liked my boyfriend. They'd go for coffee, distance, discuss work, sometimes even grab dinner if I was busy. Mark confided in her, or at least I thought he did. He seemed to value her opinions. And I knew he wouldn't want to jeopardize his standing with her. So the idea was this: if a secret admirer started showering Mark with compliments and attention, distance, and then subtly suggested they knew about his secret life, he might be pressured into confiding in someone he trusted to get advice on how to handle it. And who better than my wise older sister? I created a new Instagram account. I chose a generic, attractive profile picture of a woman I found online, nothing too specific, just enough to be believable. I gave her a name that sounded plausible, something like Lila May. Then I started following Mark. I liked a few of his old photos, left some innocuous, admiring comments, nothing too overt. I wanted to build a sense of mystery, a subtle allure. Mark, being a man with a healthy ego, took the bait. He noticed, he started liking my Lila May photos back, and soon enough, he messaged the account. My heart pounded as I saw the notification. He's playing along, distance. The initial messages were harmless, flirty banter. He'd ask Lila May about her interests, what she did. I, as Lila May, would keep it vague, mysterious, distance, always hinting that I knew him, that I'd admired him from afar. Then I ratcheted it up. I started hinting at knowing about his situation. I'd say things like, "It's a shame someone as wonderful as you is entangled in such a complicated situation." Or, "I know you deserve true happiness. Not this web of deceit you're currently in." I purposefully made it ambiguous enough that he wouldn't immediately think I was talking about me. He started getting nervous. His messages to Lila May became more frequent, more anxious. He asked what I meant, who I was. I'd reply with cryptic clues, always pushing the idea that I understood his dilemma, that I was there to listen, without ever revealing Lila May's true identity. This went on for about a week. The tension in our apartment was palpable. Mark was jumpy, irritable. He was spending even more time on his phone, furiously typing away, often leaving the room to make calls. I knew he was trying to figure out who Lila May was, and simultaneously dealing with his actual mistress. The stage was set. It was time for the final act. One evening, after I'd spent hours crafting the perfect, manipulative message as Lila May, I sent it to Mark. It read, "You're clearly struggling with all of this, Mark. It's a heavy burden to carry alone. You need someone you truly trust, someone who understands you to confide in. Perhaps your sister-in-law Sarah could offer you some perspective. She seems like a very wise woman, and she genuinely cares about you." I added a subtle hint of urgency, suggesting that Lila May was worried about him. I held my breath. I had no idea if this incredibly risky gambit would work. Would he see through it? Would he ignore it? Or would the pressure, the anxiety, and the suggestion of confiding in someone he trusted be enough to break him? I didn't have to wait long. The next day, I noticed Mark was acting even more strangely. He was quiet, withdrawn. He kept glancing at Sarah, who was over for dinner. Later that night, after Sarah had left, I found him in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. "I need to tell you something," he started, his voice barely a whisper. My heart leaped into my throat, distance, but I forced myself to remain calm, to feign ignorance. "What is it, Mark?" I asked, trying to sound concerned, not triumphant. He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, not you. I need to talk to Sarah." Alone. A chill ran down my spine. It was working. My calculated, ruthless plan was actually working. I feigned confusion, then a little hurt. "Why Sarah? What's going on?" He just mumbled something about needing her advice on a complicated work situation. I pretended to be understanding, but inside, I was a coiled spring of anticipation and dread. The next afternoon, I received a call from Sarah. Her voice was shaking, thick with tears. "You need to come over." "Now," she choked out. I rushed to her apartment, my hands clammy, my stomach churning. I walked in to find her on the couch, her face streaked with tears, and a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table. "He told me everything," she whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disgust. "Mark, he confessed." My stomach dropped, but also a strange, dark wave of satisfaction washed over me. I sat beside her, feigning concern. "What are you talking about, Sarah? What did he confess?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with pity and sorrow. "He's been cheating on you, sis. For months. With a woman from his office. He even told me about the trip next month. Said he was planning to go with her. He told me he's been living a double life. That he doesn't know what to do. And he actually asked me for advice on how to break up with you without hurting you too much." My carefully constructed facade almost crumbled. The audacity of it, asking my sister for advice on how to break my heart. He said he confided in me because some secret admirer online told him I was a wise person and that he should talk to me about his complicated situation. Sarah then relayed the entire, sickening confession, every detail of his betrayal. She was devastated, not just for me, but for herself for having misjudged him so completely. She felt complicit, even though she had no idea. "He was crying, sis," she said, her voice full of disbelief. He was actually crying, saying how much he hated himself, but that he was in too deep with this other woman. We sat there for hours, talking, crying, and planning. Sarah, once she processed the initial shock, was furious. Not only had he betrayed me, but he had used her as his emotional dumping ground, making her an unwitting participant in his deceit. We decided that I would confront him, but not immediately. We needed to let him sweat, to let the weight of his confession to Sarah sit with him. And then, we would unleash the full force of our combined fury. The confrontation happened 2 days later. I waited until he came home from work, seemingly relieved that he had gotten it off his chest with Sarah. He probably thought Sarah would help him navigate the breakup with me, that she'd soften the blow. He was wrong. I was waiting for him, my arms crossed, my expression carefully neutral. Sarah was right beside me, her face a mask of cold fury. Mark walked in, saw us both, and his eyes widened in terror. He knew instantly. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside me. He stammered, his gaze darting between us. What's going on? Oh, you know exactly what's going on, Mark. Sarah interjected, her voice sharp as a knife. You disgusting, manipulative piece of garbage. And then, it all came out, every lie. Every deception, every cruel detail of his confession to Sarah. He tried to deny it at first, tried to backtrack, but Sarah wouldn't let him. She repeated his exact words, the ones he'd shared with her, the ones he thought were safe. His face crumpled. He sank onto the couch, defeated. The confession I so desperately craved, the truth, was finally out in the open, undeniable. I watched him, this man I had loved, this man I thought I would marry, and I felt nothing but a profound emptiness. There were no more tears, just a cold, hard resolve. I told him to pack his bags and get out. He pleaded, he begged, he tried to explain, to apologize, but it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was shattered. He was out of the apartment within hours. The aftermath was messy, as you can imagine. We had to break the news to our families, who were equally shocked and disgusted. My parents were furious on my behalf, and Sarah's husband was livid that Mark had used his wife in such a vile way. It took a long time to heal. Sarah and I grew even closer, if that's possible, united by our shared experience of his betrayal. We both sought therapy to process the emotional fallout. As for Mark, he disappeared from our lives. I heard through the grapevine that his affair didn't last, and he ended up alone, his reputation in tatters among our mutual friends. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. What he did cost me a lot, but it also taught me an invaluable lesson about trust, about discernment, and about the lengths I would go to for the truth. So, here I am, on the other side of it all. It was a dark, complicated time, and I sometimes question the methods I used. Was creating that fake account manipulative? Absolutely. Was it morally gray? Probably. But given the circumstances, given his relentless deceit and refusal to be honest, I truly believe it was the only way to get him to confess, to get the truth out into the open, and to save myself from an even deeper, more prolonged heartbreak. I don't regret it. I got my closure, and my sister and I emerged stronger. If you were on my side through this whole crazy story, please like this video. And subscribe for more stories like this one, because believe me, I've got a lot more to tell. Finally, I really want to know your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Do you think I went too far? Or was it justified? Let me know. I'll see you all in the next story.